It's my pleasure to introduce John Podesta. John Podesta is the founder of the Center for American Progress. He currently serves as a senior advisor to the President for Clean Energy Innovation and Implementation. Mr. Podesta served as counselor to President Obama, where he was responsible for coordinating the administration's climate policy initiatives. In 2008, he served as co-chair of President Biden's transition team. He was a member of the UN Secretary General's high-level panel of eminent persons on the post-2015 development agenda. And he also, Mr. Podesta, served as the White House Chief of Staff to President Bill Clinton. He chaired Hillary Clinton's campaign for president in 2016. I guess the saying would go, just as he tried to get out, they pulled him right back in. So he's here with us again. So Mr. Podesta, please.
Well, thank you very much, Robbie. It's great to be here with all of you. And I want to thank SAFE for your leadership, but I particularly want to thank my friend Denny Blair, who just got off the stage, Fred Smith, General Kelly, Senator Dorgan, but particularly Robbie. He's been at this before it was cool. And I think we've come a long way as a result of his leadership and SAFE's leadership. He's really a force of nature. And I think SAFE's ability to bring people together across sectors and across allied nations is really second to none. You've been banging the drum for years that our energy security is intricately linked to our economic security and our national security. You've been telling us that we have to reduce our dependence on oil, reduce our dependence on China, and take climate risk seriously to ensure a safe, secure, and sustainable future. I'm here to tell you that President Biden has been listening. And President Biden has delivered with an agenda to bolster our security by making things in America again with American workers. And there's no place we're seeing this more than in the battery and the EV industry. Since President Biden took office, we've seen over $90 billion of new investment up and down the battery supply chain, enough to power 10 million electric vehicles and create thousands of good-paying jobs. That includes last week's announcement that LG Energy is going to build a $5.6 billion battery plant in Arizona. And in new investments in charging infrastructure and EV assembly, there's been well over $100 billion invested in the electric vehicle supply chain just over the past 2 years. The vast majority of these new investments are coming from the private sector, but of course that didn't happen by accident. It's the result of President Biden's and Vice President Harris investing in America's agenda. In the past year and a half, the Biden-Harris administration has passed 3 game-changing laws for the future of electric transportation. First, through the bipartisan infrastructure law, we've made a historic $7.5 billion investment to build a nationwide EV charging network covering every single state. We can now drive from sea to shining sea in our electric vehicles. The Department of Energy made nearly $3 billion in battery manufacturing grants last fall, and they're upgrading and modernizing our electric grid to prepare the power sector for a clean energy future. EPA is deploying clean school buses in communities across the country so kids can breathe clean air on their way to class. And the Department of Transportation is making the biggest investment in public transit in history and the biggest investment in passenger rail since the creation of Amtrak. Next, through the CHIPS and Science Act, the Commerce Department is overseeing $50 billion for the domestic semiconductor industry, a crucial ingredient for upgrading our grid and electrifying our transportation and buildings. And the third law, the one I'm overseeing the implementation of, the Inflation Reduction Act, will make EVs accessible to more Americans by offering a $7,500 tax credit for new eligible vehicles. More guidance on this is coming soon. Stay tuned. And Americans can take advantage of the first ever $4,000 credit for used electric vehicles. The Inflation Reduction Act offers tax credits for commercial clean vehicles and EV charging. Even municipalities who don't traditionally file federal taxes will be able to benefit from these credits through a direct pay option. The law expands DOE's Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Loan Program, which offers loans for manufacturing clean transportation technologies. And battery cells and fuel cells are eligible for investment and production tax credits that now last for 10 years thanks to the IRA. 10 years of certainty. That's a big change for those of you who've been around Washington for a while, rather than that off and on annual end-of-year reauthorization roller coaster. Companies now can plan for the future, build big projects, and you're seeing a response in the marketplace day after day. These laws work together to shape the ground for private investment, to boost innovation so companies can scale up great new ideas, and to make sure the transition to clean energy will be government-enabled but private sector-led. These laws will put us on a path to achieve President Biden's goals of cutting emissions in half by 2030, powering our nation with 100% clean electricity by 2035, and give us a clear pathway to a net zero economy by mid-century. But as I say often, it's one thing to pass a bill, it's a completely different thing to implement it. We don't just need these laws to help us meet our climate and clean energy goals. We need to make sure they boost our competitiveness, create good paying jobs, and benefit every American in every community. And to do that, we need your help. First, we need companies, local governments, NGOs, and individuals to take full advantage of these programs while using these new resources to bring clean energy and clean transportation to underserved communities. The bill is structured to do that by giving a bonus to people who invest in projects that are sited in low-income, disadvantaged, traditional energy communities. So the transition is finally a just one, reaching every corner of America. Second, we need your help in building secure, sustainable supply chains for clean energy. The past year has shown us that as long as we remain reliant on fossil fuels, as SAFE has been trumpeting for years and years, we remain vulnerable to price shocks and manipulation by dictators like Vladimir Putin. Russia's brutal, monstrous invasion of Ukraine demonstrated to Europe the consequences of being dependent on fossil fuels coming from an authoritarian leader and an authoritarian government. And if we're not careful, we could see the same thing happen to the clean energy economy. Right now, we rely on imports for more than 40 critical minerals, and China dominates the supply chain for key clean energy technologies. If you just look at batteries, they dominate every step of the supply chain, from extracting more than 75% of the world's graphite to processing a majority of lithium, cobalt, and graphite supplies, to completely dwarfing the U.S. on the production of batteries and their components. For national security and for our economic well-being, we've got to reduce our reliance on China. So we need investment here at home, not just in the end products like EVs, but up and down the full supply chain. And we're partnering with our allies and friends around the world to build global supply chains for clean energy, because we can't, quite frankly, meet 100% of our demand with American industry and American production of critical minerals alone. The State Department launched the Mineral Security Partnership last June with 10 of our closest allies and partners to build secure and responsible supply chains for critical minerals. President Biden and European Commission President von der Leyen are just in their recent meeting, open talks on a critical minerals agreement. And this morning, Ambassador Tai signed an agreement with Japan for joint cooperation on battery and critical mineral supply chains. You can clap for that. Third, we need your help to bring EVs to more communities and educate consumers about the health and financial benefits. That's why the White House is launching an EV Acceleration Challenge to spur new commitments from private and public sectors and from civil society that support America's transition to electric vehicles. We're looking for commitments that help people make informed choices about their next car, increase awareness about how EVs work and the benefits they offer, grow EV penetration in public and private fleets, or expand access to EV charging in commercial and multifamily settings. We're excited to announce the first set of commitments later this week, and if you're ready to join, we're accepting submissions on a rolling basis. We're going to keep that effort going so more and more people make commitments to move to electric. All in all, there's never been a better time to invest in clean energy in America. Our administration is going full steam ahead towards a future where 21st century industries like battery manufacturing support economic development, create good paying jobs, and high quality jobs, where everyone can get where they need to go with safe, healthy, affordable, and reliable transportation, and where our clean energy economy runs on reliable, secure supply chains that avoid the mistakes of the past. As long as we work together, as long as we seize the opportunities offered by the agenda that President Biden and Vice President Harris have put before the country, this future will become our reality, and it will become reality sooner than anyone ever imagined. Thank you, and I look forward to talking to Robbie. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So you said that I was for these things before there was cool. Does that make me cool now?
Absolutely. You're a trendsetter, Robbie.
That's what I keep trying to tell my kids. They
What
don't
do
believe
they say
it.
in response?
Dad.
Don't ban TikTok.
Yeah. Dad, you're going to get canceled. EVs have come a long way, but they're still not accessible to most Americans. Really, how is the administration thinking holistically about making sure that everyone can benefit from the clean transportation future? And I guess, there's lots of, competing priorities, security, environmental justice and others. And how would you think about prioritizing those? It's hard to accomplish everything at once.
Yeah, well, look, for example, the IRA is a big bill. There's 135 separate programs. Most of the effort in the clean energy space is running through the tax code, not through traditional federal grant programs that are run by the agencies. But I think that to answer your question, I think there are three key elements. Lower cost, provide more secure and reliable charging so that people feel like they can get around and get to places, and make sure that most trips in fact occur over short distances, and that range anxiety that people feel is, for most people, not a real issue in the sense that they're taking short daytime commuter trips. But people want the assurance that charging is built out, that it's done through fast charging, high performance. We just let the first grants under the NEVI program that was part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. We got commitments from on the private sector, including Tesla opening up its charging network to other kind of vehicles, other BP, EVgo, Hertz, others, to build out charging across the country. So I think that's going along very well, so that there will be high-speed charging available across the country on the interstates every 50 miles and penetrating into neighborhoods across the country. That's number one. Number two is lower cost. And that's, I think, what the Energy Department's program is all about, to try to invest in new technologies, create new battery chemistries, constantly drive innovation, get the cost down, make the cost of an electric vehicle at the purchase point on a par with internal combustion engines, and then support that transition through tax support, both on the commercial vehicle side, where there's, for heavy duty vehicles, there's up to a $40,000 tax credit. For light duty vehicles and trucks, the $7,500 credit that I described. It comes in two parts, so it's really 3750 and 3750. We can get into that if you want to. And then that used credit, I think, will open up and make available particularly over time, more vehicles for people who are in the mid-market price point. And I think what's selling these cars is they're cool. Go back to they're cool. They're fun to drive. If you look at the marketing, it reminds me of when I grew up in the 50s, rather than marketing cars, a decade ago. They're exciting, and I think once people get behind the wheel, they're really they get hooked on them. So over time, the president has set a goal of that new car sales should be 50% by 2030. We think we can meet that with the incentives of the Inflation Reduction Act, and we've seen a big boost in EV sales, triple since President Biden came into office. So we're optimistic, but there's a lot of work to do.
So I guess it is the $7,500 question. Can you tell us anything? Probably not.
We promise. There was a statutory deadline in the bill it's called the 30D credit, the credit for individual sales, consumer sales. It's complicated. It's split between sourcing of the critical and processing of critical minerals and the sourcing of components in the battery for the vehicle, and it proved to be complicated enough that we missed the statutory deadline of December 31st. It sort of came at the end of the passage of the bill, so it was a very technically challenging provision to implement. Secretary promised that would be done by the end of March, and we will make good on that promise. So it is now
You got a couple
March
days.
28th.
You got till Friday.
So I think we have till Friday, and we intend to meet
We
that.
were going to do our
intend to meet
summit
that
on
deadline.
We were going to do our summit on a Friday, so you could announce it, but I didn't know if anyone would come.
And I think that Treasury issued a white paper in December, so I think people have a general sense of where we're going with this. But again, it's complicated because of what I said in my remarks, which is we are over-reliant on Chinese supply chains. What the structure of the vehicle, the structure of the credit is based on whether the minerals are produced or processed in the in North America or a free trade country, and the components similarly in North America. But so it's complicated, but I think we're very optimistic in terms of the investment that we're seeing here. So I think in the near term, auto companies are kind of scrambling to meet the terms of the credit. But over the very near term, I think we'll see both the supply chain and the production of electric vehicle batteries in the United States happening quickly. And so I'm very optimistic that this program will deliver on its promise to get people into electric vehicles.
So the CHIPS Act, has a very deep national security focus, sort of this bipartisan sense that we need to do something, and has its own bill and an investment. I guess my question to you would be, do people see batteries in the same way as this deep national security concern, and some of the provisions like the foreign entity of concern provisions and things like that are in the CHIPS Act, could they be seen over, or is this like,
they're pushing over into the battery sector. The other place where we're concerned about our dependence on Chinese sources of supply is in the solar space as well, particularly the upstream elements of the solar supply chain. So we're working on all of that to try to reshore or friendshore as much of that supply chain as possible. I think the penetration on the chip side is deeper on a bipartisan basis, but I think it's from our perspective, from the president's perspective, and the administration's perspective, these are equal challenges from an economic and national security perspective. We cannot exchange one dependency for another. I use the example of the European dependence on Russian fossils. We saw how that movie ended or is ending. It's not pretty. We can't be in that situation. We have to have the ability to basically source, secure, manufacture amongst friends and allies, as well as really substantially in the United States. You know, we get criticized sometimes for this emphasis on trying to use taxpayer dollars to direct investment into America, creating American jobs, and we make no apologies for that. I think that's the president's strategy, where we let too much of our manufacturing base drift overseas, particularly to Asia. I think that was challenging for the security of our country over the long term, and the president thinks if we're spending U.S. taxpayer dollars doing that in a way that benefits investments in the United States, creates good paying jobs. The other thing I didn't mention is that in the law, it's very unusual and very interesting the way it's been shaped, which is that it's a private sector decision, but you get a very strong bonus if you pay prevailing wage, if you use certified apprenticeships,
Right.
if you create the workforce supply chain, if you will, to make sure people are trained and paid a decent wage. That's what the president's vision was, which was to build an economy from the middle out and the bottom up. And we think based on the announcements we're seeing, really all across the country, from Georgia and Alabama to Ohio and Michigan to Nevada and California, people are responding to that, and manufacturing is in a renaissance in the United States.
First of all, it's great to hear that you see the equal importance of these issues. That's something we've been talking about. And, you know, as we go from a fossil world to a minerals world, these are the energy. These rocks are the energy of the future. There's no different than oil and gas, so we better not become dependent. Some people have said that our dependence on China is like not just OPEC, it's OPEC squared. And that's really our real challenge. And we've seen how that's gone for us over these decades.
Yeah, and you know, look, I think that I had a lot of experience, particularly in the Obama administration, trying to push the Chinese and trying to work with them on the climate challenge, and Secretary Kerry continues to do that. But there's no question we're in a period of intense competition. And, you know, I think from a global perspective, particularly if we're find our way to a place of cooperation with particularly our European and Asian allies, to go further, faster, to make this transition to clean energy, to tackle the climate crisis, we're all better off. And that, you know, Chinese have their own big internal market. They're not going to stop, but we need them to do better to reduce their emissions. They're now by far the country with the highest level of emissions in the world. They need to transform their energy system as well. But I think we're in a period of healthy competition, and we should accept that challenge and build here in America.
Yeah, I mean, one reason they're so high in emissions is we've shifted over some of our emissions to do these heavy energy intensive things. So, you know, we've always said, let's do it here, let's do it cleaner, you know, we have a regulatory system. As long as we have transparency, there's a better place to do it and have a higher. We can't have a hear no evil, see no evil strategy on what we need to have this transition. Let me ask you, from mining to processing to transmission, it always seems to come down to permitting.
Yeah.
Not just here in the United States, but every one of our allies is having the same argument. It's amazing how many people say the United States is the hardest place to do business. To me, all the time.
Particularly to build things.
Yes.
I mean, there's some kind of businesses where there's pretty easily, there's an easy flow. But when it comes to building things, it gets tough.
So there seems to be a split in the Democratic Party about permitting reform. Republicans have just introduced some permitting reform that if they pass, they'll, I guess, reach out to the Senate to do something. How important is permitting reform to the administration? How much does the president want to lean in on that? Or are you hopeful that we'll be able to do something in this area?
Extremely important. Let me say a couple of things about this. First of all, we supported permitting reform in the last Congress. Senator Manchin put forward a proposal that the administration supported and continue to support. It stalled in December on a 47 to 47 vote. I think a lot of Republicans who claim to be for permitting reform that was more of a political vote than it was their view of the substance of what was in that legislation. It would have been very helpful. Just to give you some context for this, we need to increase our high voltage, high performance transmission in the electric sector by 60% by 2030. In order to do that, we need to permit twice as fast as we've been permitting, maybe even faster than that, quite frankly, because it's a tremendous bottleneck, both the ability to build high voltage transmission as well as the problems of interconnection, a balkanized grid. There's a lot of problems that would have been helped by passage of that legislation. We're hopeful that we can develop bipartisan legislation again in this Congress, but we're also using every authority we have to try to speed up, take account of, and including for the first time ever really utilizing on this transmission point an authority that was put in the Federal Power Act in 2005. No other administrations really utilized 216H, for those of you who are paying attention to the power sector, to give the Secretary of Energy the ability to consolidate, set critical deadlines, and run the process to get to permitting decisions faster. This has become a topic that the President has charged all of us in the White House, including the Chief of Staff. Mitch Landrieu runs the bipartisan infrastructure law, Gina Raimondo, who's really leading on the CHIPS bill, and myself, to pay attention to. We've reorganized the White House to create a permitting council amongst the cabinet secretaries. I have been, I've served in 3 White Houses. I have never seen the top tier of political appointees pay attention to individual permitting decisions. That's always well down. Things get stuck. They drift. It can take years. No one sort of gets in and unties the knot. And that's different. And the President's demanding action from us, and we're going to try to produce that. There's separate issues around litigation that we have become overly litigious and things can get gummed up, but we'll deal with that, kind of one project at a time and try to make progress. And then I just want to say one thing, though, about the bill that you mentioned. We just issued a veto threat on it. It's unbalanced. It's repealing several very important provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act, particularly those oriented towards provide support for middle and low income Americans. It's got some very dubious environmental giveaways, including exposing workers to hydrofluoric acid that are included in that bill. And it does nothing for clean energy. I mean, right. It's like, if you go back and look at the Manchin bill, it was a balanced bill that dealt with energy security, that was trying to say where we need reform to move, particularly now as a result of the war in Ukraine, to deal with the issues of moving more gas to Europe, along with clean power. It was a balanced bill. On the House bill, H.R. 1, has nothing that deals with these clean energy challenges. It's all largely a giveaway to polluting industries and repeal of IRA. So we've issued a veto threat. We think when it gets to the Senate, it'll be sort of DOA. But that doesn't mean we're not for bipartisan legislation. And we will work with both sides of the aisle in the Senate to try to get a more balanced bill that both accelerates the transition to clean and deals with these other energy security issues. And, you know, I talk to Senator Manchin about this every day.
Ultimately, I mean, that's the compromise we're probably going to see, right? A balanced approach on accelerating.
I hope so.
Well,
I hope so. But in the
we need.
meantime, we're going to do whatever we can under our existing authority to make progress using Fast 41, using some authorities that we utilize through the regulatory process to accelerate the building of clean energy. We're enthusiastic about that.
So when you were appointed, I wrote an op-ed that compared you to Harold Ickes in the Roosevelt administration, who was called the oil czar. He was also the pit bull of the administration. But he was the enforcer to get things done. And I felt that when that was passed, we needed an enforcer that knows the system. You know, I've compared this moment to of the reindustrialization, clean energy, and the resupply of weapons we need.
Yeah.
Every ally is doing the same thing. We need all the same materials. This is the arsenal of democracy that ultimately helped us win World War II. So we clearly see in the Ukraine, right, this industrial base we have is so much more powerful than Russia's that ultimately that hopefully turns the tide. Based on your experience in government, you know, and what you're seeing today, are you hopeful? And what is the one thing you wish the government would do and the private sector were doing to create this arsenal of energy?
Yeah, well, first of all, Robbie, it's quite an honor to be compared to Harold Ickes. His son's a very good friend of mine, and
I hope you sent them the op-ed.
And he sent me his book, his dad's book, which was a tremendous read. And you know, things are different. By the way, Secretary Ickes, I also fancy myself a conservationist and worked with 3 presidents on that. And he was, of course, the great Secretary of Interior that protected more land in the United States. That people don't know this, but than anyone.
Well, I think that was so shocking when he became the oil czar, and then
Yeah.
realized how important it was to, you know,
Yeah.
what do they say? We floated to victory on a sea of American oil. So
Yeah.
he got that.
You know, the structures are different, the legal system's different. You can't quite bash people the way one once did, but he got results, and we aim to get results. But you asked one thing that, and we've talked about them really. The 3 sort of big challenges are supply chains, workforce, and getting people trained up for these jobs. University of Massachusetts estimated there'll be 9 million jobs created by the IRA alone. But people need training, and they need to, and people who traditionally have been left out of some of those work categories need to be brought in, women, minorities, etc. And then permitting. And but I would say the one thing we need to do, we have an obligation to get clarity and to move quickly to take these provisions. As I noted, so much of this is in the support of tax provisions that are that need clarification, so that there is certainty, so that people could finance projects, make smart investments, create that a cycle of innovation. Take startups. I was at the RBE conference last week. Take startups to the level where they're actually the innovation that is such an asset of the United States is brought to bear on this challenge. But we need speed and scale. We just need to go a lot faster and a lot bigger. And I think that if we do our job and clarify on both the new technologies, like how the green hydrogen tax credit is going to work, direct air capture, interest in now much more interest in carbon capture and sequestration, and then we get the permitting stuff right, I think the private sector will respond. There's plenty of capital to be deployed And I think I think that if we provide that enabling environment, then the private sector is going to deploy the capital. But they just need to get on with that job, because that's where the future is. And it's really, if you look at whether it's the IPCC report that came out 2 weeks ago, or it's the U.S. government report on the insured damage that occurred in the United States because of extreme weather, we just got to go a lot faster. We're seeing it every day, the effects of climate change upending people's lives, changing the economy, and we need to get to a more secure and stable place.
So we have a lot of companies come to our office all the time now, from Australia, from Canada, from or even American companies are like, what do we do? Who do we talk to? And I guess what we wanted this summit to be was beyond the why, get to the how. So maybe provide. You said the cabinet ministers, the secretaries care about actual permits. So maybe what would your advice be to these companies?
Look, I think our doors are open. I mean that. I say that. People don't believe me, but it's true. I mean, I see a lot of people and try to listen to individual problems and try to see if I can direct them or find the right person to deal with them. But I think we've got a great cabinet and one that's super hands-on, whether that's in the loan program with Jigar Shah or with the grant programs that Secretary Granholm is implementing. On the CHIP side, Secretary Raimondo is really all over this. On the public land side, I think between Secretary Haaland, Deputy Secretary Boudreau, I think they're open to trying to resolve and work with communities to solve problems. There are going to be conflicts and they need resolution. I think one of the obligations we have as an administration, in addition to speeding things up, is to going in early and listening to communities that have often been ignored, left out, left behind, borne the brunt of power sector and industrial pollution, and listen to them and try to find workable solutions so that their equities are addressed as well. And I think if you get in early and you have a problem-solving mindset, then you can make things work, and not, always rely on trying to upend everything at the last minute through litigation. That's our goal, but that puts a burden on us to be out in those communities earlier, listening more seriously, making good on the Justice 40 commitment to have 40% of the benefits go to communities that have borne the, as I said, environmental justice communities and others, disadvantaged communities. That's a lot of moving parts, but I think we're committed to getting that job done.
We had that great announcement about Japan and this agreement. First of all, were you surprised at how quickly and furiously our allies went at us and tried to explain to them that no one knew this was coming and that it wasn't some big secret that anyone knew? And then two is, how quickly do you see these other agreements happening?
Well, as I noted, I think the President began talks with President van der Leyen when she was here a couple weeks ago, and those talks are proceeding, and I'm hopeful we can move those rapidly. The Japan agreement came together relatively quickly. We have an agricultural free trade agreement with Japan, which made things a little bit different, maybe a little bit easier. We have a free trade agreement, obviously, in North America and with the Republic of Korea. But I think
Chile.
that, and with
really
Chile.
important.
Yes, but there are others that we need to. I mentioned the minerals partnership. I think that one of the things that's occurred after a lot of consternation, particularly from our European friends, about the fact that having complained for so long, particularly during the Trump years and then even into the Biden years, about the United States not being in the lead, once we took the lead again, they seemed to be taken by surprise. And, we've encouraged them, look, we want to go together on this journey. They have the same vulnerability. I think they now see a common security interest in trying, particularly in the supply chain world, to develop more secure supply chains. And they've responded by adjusting their own industrial policy, if you will, industrial strategy, to provide support, and we wish them well in that. So I think that's on a more even keel, and the idea that we're going to try as a group of allies and partners to try to ensure that all of our industrial economies can have the security of supply chains that are reliable is something that we have common cause with Europeans on. And so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to wrap that up.
We always say, let's build a wall and then open our drawbridges together from this.
We have the example of the steel and aluminum deal, where for the first time there was a emissions-oriented deal on essentially regulating the trade in a very important market to both sides. So I think if we stay engaged, keep talking, I think we're seeing the world in very similar ways, and we can all prosper together.
Okay, we're getting the hook, but let me ask you quickly. What can we at SAFE and the Electrification Coalition do to help you achieve this goal?
Well, look, I think that get us back to the center on permitting, help with that, I think. Try to educate members, our discussion about chips versus the power and transportation sector is one that I think you're particularly, have both credibility on and our door opener on Capitol Hill to make sure that we stay on track, it becomes more bipartisan, and then basically at the company level, like I said, size and scale, just go fast. This is the best investment environment for clean energy that's ever existed in the United States. So it's time to deploy capital.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
we
Robbie.
look forward to working with you. Thank you. Good luck. Talk to you soon.